Hi, I'm Wally Lewis and I'm going back to school with Student Edge.
Hi, I'm Simon Morado, and today we're going back to school with Wally Lewis. Wally, thanks so much for chatting with us today.
My pleasure.
Tell us, what were you like as a student?
I think I was always a fairly determined young school student, but I've got to admit that I did have the faults of being a sports lover. And in my family, I think doing well at sport was probably the primary objective for me.
It's interesting because your parents were sports people. So was it fated that you were kind of going to follow a career in sport, or were they indeed telling you, you know, it's good to have a few backups?
Look, they were always very determined to see me succeed at school. But having a great love of sport themselves, they understood the difficulties that can impose your life, make it so much more tougher, I think. And as determined as I was to make sure that I did as well as possible at school, I think it was all about footy. I believed that I was going somewhere in sport in my life, and I think I probably had a desire to do so, which was probably not good news for my school teachers.
Well, were there classes that you did enjoy, or was it pretty much just waiting to get out onto the field?
Loved English, always loved English all the way through school. Had an absolute ball with that. Being a sports person, when PE came about, I had a special interest in that. Loved poetry in the early days, and my dad always used to make a little bit of a joke about it, that did that come as a bit of an indication why I got to love music so much. When I went to high school, my English teacher there, we used to do sort of poetry, and that was of great interest, but it was always the story behind the story in poetry and songwriting, which came to the fore. And I had a wonderful teacher in grade 11 and 12, and we used to get to be able to study the story behind the story in music, and for us it was Bob Dylan. We used to sit there and listen to his songs during the class and try and work out exactly what Bob's the background of every song was all about.
Well, he's a Nobel Prize winner now, so it's definitely literature. Did you get to any songwriting yourself?
Not at all. Got to sing plenty of them.
You sure we're not going to find, like, there's not a diary up there?
No. And my wife will tell that I am the worst singer in the world as well, so I certainly didn't take after Bob Dylan too much at all, but had a great interest. But I probably had in the back of my mind that sport, that was going to take the priority.
Well, you started playing representative rugby union at 17, is that correct?
Yeah, 16 actually,
16.
A little bit earlier.
You're in the heart of it at that point. You know, you're devoting your time to sport. Does study take a back seat? Is it hard to balance those, you know, trying to get good grades, trying to graduate, but obviously excelling at this other thing?
It probably did take a back seat, yeah. I've got to...
But you're fine with that?
I've got to admit that it was a bit of a problem. My mum and dad always wanted to see me do a little bit better at school, but I believe that rugby league was the priority for me. I always seemed to have a great interest, to understand a lot more, and have an opportunity to be able to work with some fairly talented sports people while I was growing up, and I think that made the education in progressing to the rugby league standards, higher standards, so much more easy for me. And by the time I'd left high school, that was where the biggest decision of my life was to be made at that stage. I was selected in an Australian schoolboys tour. We went to Japan, France, England, Ireland, Wales and Holland. For 17-year-old kids, I think we were learning just as much about life as we were about playing representative rugby union. I think it was an indication for me that there were some fairly important decisions to be made, to know exactly where I wanted to go, and to make the correct decision along the way. I felt at one stage that I did want to play rugby, but I believed that if I did so, I'd probably let my parents down a little bit, who'd spent so much time and effort to making sure that I got the best possible training in the backyard, playing for my local club, and then going on to the representative games for Queensland. Believed that was important to repay them in some way, shape or form. And if I had time all over again, I don't think I'd change a single thing.
Well, I mean, why would you? Because you achieved so much in the sport, and obviously, you know, look, your nickname, the King, you're partly of the Invincibles. These are great nicknames to have.
The nickname of the King, a lot of people see that as being almost glory attached to it, as being a massive pat on the back. The nickname King was given to me in an insulting term.
As far as insulting nicknames go, that's probably one of the better ones.
It is. It is.
It's not too bad.
I've been called plenty of others worse whenever I go and play in Sydney, that's for sure.
But look, the history book will record it as the King, and it certainly suggests someone who people feel hit the pinnacle of the sport. I'm curious, do you feel that way? Do you feel like I did everything I wanted to do in rugby?
Missed out on one thing, and that was secure a premiership, playing for the Broncos in the Sydney Rugby League competition. Performance-wise, I was pretty happy. I mean, you look back, you mark yourself and think, I could have done that better. If only I had time all over again, I probably would have done it in this way, shape or form. But having been, at the places that I have, I think I've been very fortunate to have played alongside some wonderful players, been guided by some terrific coaches. And some of the mentors that I've had an association with has been very beneficial as well.
Well, now you're working as a broadcaster. Is this kind of the path you saw for yourself? Playing, coaching, broadcasting, or was it a bit of a surprise sort of late turn?
Yeah, it was a bit of a surprise because I thought all of my interest initially would be in the coaching game. But I knew that I wasn't always going to stick to the coaching game for a long time. I didn't think that was probably the greatest strength of my life. While I might have been able to play a bit of footy, being able to talk about it in the correct way and give guidance certainly didn't ever reach the level that I dreamed of. So it was a case of look somewhere else. Obviously, when we've got the broadcasters of Rugby League making an offer, and I was working with Channel 7 originally, I didn't have any association with the National Rugby League at that stage, but I was working for Fox Sports for a little while and got the chance to be able to travel the country and talk about footy, and loved doing it. I could do that 7 days a week because you're basically getting paid good money to go and talk about the game that you love. And anybody that has trouble doing that, I think they've got to take a look at themselves again. They're very hard to please if that's the case.
Well, throughout all this, you had epilepsy, which you kept private. When that eventually became public, was that difficult? Was it difficult to kind of deal with it on that public level, or was the additional support and encouragement, did that kind of reveal itself to be a bit of a saving grace?
Well, I didn't tell anybody for a long, long time. I probably had trouble accepting that. I remember just somehow evading it for a long, long time, and then that went on for years and years and years, and then came the night where I was sitting on set and I felt it coming on. I was sitting with Bruce Page and Heather Ford, and I felt it coming on. I think I yelled out, "Oh no," just as the guy was doing the countdown from 10 seconds to "you're on," and they were saying, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I couldn't answer it. I knew I was in trouble, and I looked directly at the camera and couldn't get anything else. I urinated in my pants, which made me feel even lower, and I could hear something in my ear. I couldn't work out what it was, but it was just the director saying, "Go, go, talk," and I couldn't get the words out. My right arm was shaking, and somebody said to me on the floor, you okay? You okay?" And I couldn't get the words out. I was away for a week, and then came back in, and it happened all over again, absolutely identical the second time. And I thought, well, now I'm going to have to tell somebody about this. But it was something, years and years after I first started to deal with it, that I was trying to hide from, trying to get away from. And I often said later, I was just a coward. I didn't want to deal with something that could have been done so comfortably, and my ears used to prick up when I'd hear about somebody having epilepsy and the struggles that they were having, and the path that they decided to follow. But it was a case of not wanting to bring it to the fore, and I felt that if it became public knowledge, that could well be the end of my career here at Channel 9, and I probably had the fear factor.
Well, thankfully, that has not been the case. And I'm glad to hear that there's a happy ending to the story. Wally, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure indeed. Thank you very much.
Great meeting you. Hey everyone. If you enjoyed that video, subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Or find more of our stuff at studentedge.com.au.